you go through enough recessions and you realize, okay, there's going to be a bottoming out. We're going to get out of it. It's not going to last forever.
This is the business of architecture. Hello, and welcome back, Architect Nation. This is the show where you'll discover tips, strategies, and secrets for running a practice that lets you do your best work more often. Today's guest is Mary Johnston. She's the founding partner of Johnston Architects, a successful architectural practice located in Seattle, Washington. The firm's work is highly regarded for its thoughtful approach and harmonious design. They've won numerous awards and been published in many publications. Johnston and her husband Ray started the firm over 30 years ago in the basement of their Seattle bungalow. And in today's episode, you'll discover the story about how they grew from those early days to growing into a practice of 30 plus staff members and doing remarkable and important work. They started the practice with several small residential commissions as well as a large remodel of a library, and you'll get to hear about that today. Also, you'll hear, among other things, Mary's top lessons learned from Recessions and her advice for pursuing and winning higher caliber work. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's executive training program for architectural professionals who own and run a firm and are looking to get more freedom, fulfillment, and financial reward from their practice. And with that, here's today's show. Mary, welcome to the Business of Architecture.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So please tell us, what's the focus of Johnston Architects currently?
Oh, wow. Our focus has always been and remains sort of multi-focused. And I think in lots of ways that's been a secret to our longevity. Ray and I started our business about 30 years ago, 31 now. And, coming out of architecture school and working for some larger firms at first, and then starting our own firm quite early in our, life of experience as architects. So we didn't know a lot about running a business, certainly. But we've gone through many downturns and many recessions.
Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt. How early did you say it was?
We started our business about 31 years ago. So what is that, 1991, something like that, 92. Yeah. And
Okay.
so...
And you had been out of school for how long at that time?
Oh, I had been out of school for less than 10 years, probably 8 years by that time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were, had some experience, but not a lot. We'd always had been working for other people. So going through a couple of recessions, or at least 2 recessions with the business, we learned that being eclectic in our business, as far as the work is concerned, was a very good thing. Because when the private work was sparse, the public work was ongoing because of just the way public funding goes for projects. That would usually lag behind recessionary times. And so we learned that if we do a little bit of everything, that we could survive a little bit better. And so I would say, as far as the work goes, our focus is multi-pronged. We do some single-family work. And for a firm of our size, it's a little bit unusual sometimes. We're 31 people right now. We do some public work. We do libraries, civic centers. We're just finishing starting a senior center. We do, as I said, single family and multifamily work as well. Some adaptive reuse, little tiny bit of historic preservation. We used to do a little bit more of that in the past. So that's the focus of the work. I think the focus right now of our business in general is to keep our employees happy and productive, and for Ray and I especially, to make sure that there's some longevity to the firm and that it keeps going after we decide to step aside a little bit.
In terms of the work that you do, which one came first? Were you doing single family first, or did you have public type projects at the beginning?
Interestingly enough, when it was just 2 people working out of a basement, we had both tiny residential remodels and a large public library remodel. So we had two things going at once, which was very interesting. Of course, it was really hard to bring clients to the basement of our bungalow in Seattle.
Well, that sounds quite exciting to start out with a big library remodel like that. Was that because you'd done that kind of work previously in the other firms you'd worked with?
Yes, exactly. And we got along well with the clients, and they just said, well, sure, let's just go with this tiny new firm. So that was great. That was very lucky.
What are the differences between you see in the actual fees being charged for like your compensation for the single family side versus the private or the public work that you get? Is there a big gap there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess two ways. One is, of course, you have to do a lot of single family projects to, equal the fee of one big, large project. So you have to have a lot more projects. But in interesting ways, the single family, depending on the client, it's so variable. Sometimes you have a very strict budget. The client says, this is what I've got, and this is, what you have to work with. And you have to be extremely efficient and do a little triage, with what you're going to be providing sometimes, although we always try to provide the best quality no matter what the size of the job. And then there are other projects that have very big budgets, single family budgets, and you have a lot of freedom, and so those are exciting and fun too. Whereas public projects, you are held to fee caps, and you can't exceed a public budget. That's just not going to work. So the loop is a little more closed in those projects than in, say, a single family project.
That makes perfect sense. Talk to me about hiring and building a team. Right now, you say you're about 31 people in the office. What have been do you remember if you made any mistakes early on in hiring, or did you just knock it out of the park right from the start and be able to have incredible team members that were a perfect fit?
Well, 31 years is a long time although we do have some people who've been with us for a very long time, 16 years, 12 years, which in architecture world is pretty good. That's a lot of longevity. And, of course, we have had people come and go, but I think some of our early decisions were good decisions. And I'm not sure how much that is from just our forethought or just luck, frankly. One of the things that has been very helpful is that almost throughout the history of the firm, or at least half the history of the firm, I've taught at the University of Washington. I'll teach 1 quarter a year, and frankly, as any architect who also teaches knows, that's a great place to find employees. That's where you find talent as it's just starting to show up and develop. So that's been really great. And one of our partners was one of my students really early on. And so she's been with us, I think, about 13 years now. So it's really fantastic. And she's been a partner for maybe 5 of those 13 years. So she really grew up in the firm. It's the only place she's ever worked. Luckily, it's the only place she wants to work. So that's really good. And then some other choices have been very fortuitous. We have another partner that worked for us also several years ago. I think she started with us when we were only maybe 3 or 4 years old as a firm. She left to work on her own for a long time, and she has recently come back to the firm, and now she's a partner. So those relationships are very, they mean a lot to us, and we try to, not only cultivate people as architects, but sort of cultivate them as friends and family members too. So that's been very gratifying. And, there are always people who decide, well, I want to go work at a really huge firm, or I want to go work on my own. So, that happens too.
Yeah. Okay. Now, regarding the body of work that you get, do you remember, was there a particular project that was a breakthrough project that you felt, you and your partner felt kind of put you on the map? Was there any point like that, or has it been more of a gradual increase in scope and size and prominence of your projects?
I think with this two-pronged practice that we have with residential work and public work, that at two different scales, we've been able to, at some point, there's been a breakthrough. Probably with the public work, we partnered on a public library in Seattle. A long time ago, Seattle had a very robust program for funding new branch libraries. It was called the Libraries for All program, and they built many branch libraries. And a lot of great architects in Seattle were sort of part of that program. And we partnered with another firm for a pretty prominent library in that program, and that helped us get on the map that way. That won and then there was another one that won a National AIA Honor Award. And so I say that was a King County library, and that was a real breakthrough for us because, as you know, that kind of thing brings you a lot of recognition, and that was a happy circumstance. As far as houses go, we've designed a couple of vacation houses that we have been really proud of and have gotten a lot of publicity. There's a couple of houses that have been in publications, and they're always referred to, even now, even after 10 years after the fact, by potential clients. They'll say, well, I looked at your website and I recognize that house. I think there's probably two houses that keep coming up over and over again. So, those are sort of the breakthrough projects for us, I think.
Okay. Wow. And over the past 30 years or so, what actions or what strategies have you employed for business development, for getting more work? Or has it been simply a matter of we just do good work and the work comes to us?
Well, I think everyone likes to think that it's the latter. We just do good work and the work just comes in the door. And sometimes that happens. I think it's a combination of things. And then there's also, there are times certainly when you have to be pretty aggressive about building on your past successes and networking. There have been various organizations that Ray and I have belonged to over the years, not only planning and architecture organizations that are related to the field, but also we have taken our interests outside of architecture and sort of strategically aligned them with the business as well. So we are members of a couple of land trusts, and we have in the past been involved in nonprofit organizations that support national parks and things like that. And you just start to, and the work we do with libraries, then it becomes sort of a natural thing to be involved with, like the Library Foundation and things like that. We did a Seattle Humane Society building, so we became quite involved in helping the Humane Society with some things, and just some of these things we can do pro bono, but sometimes good deeds come back and help you out in a business. So those are some of the business development things that we have done. We still, are always interested in going to go to conferences, ULI, and various organizations that are involved in multifamily. Those are important to us too, that sector of our work. So I guess those are the main things we do as founders of the firm. We can go and just be there and network a little bit. And now we're encouraging our junior employees to do that as well. In the office, we have a stipend for people who want to go to a conference or want to also continue their education a little bit, learning new things. So that's always kind of fun.
I would imagine that after this time that you have a quite an extensive network of relationships, people you know through the ULI, some of these other conferences that you attend, the local organizations, the land trust that you're on. Would you say that you have a pretty robust network?
I'd say so. I mean, It's hard to avoid after you've been around a long time. Pandemic, I have to say, has been sort of had a dampening effect on all of that. And I think I probably speak for so many architects. It's been so hard to maintain and sort of nurture those relationships. You really have to try a little bit harder. And now things are loosening up, but I just still feel the residue from the past couple years. So it's a matter of getting back out there. I think with people working remotely, my own personal feeling is that has been difficult for architects, especially young architects. And people kind of get settled in at home and think, well, this is really comfortable here. I don't think I need to go to that event or to that in-person meeting. And besides, my wardrobe isn't sufficient for that anymore. It's really kind of a funny phenomenon. We've all become a little bit more of a homebodies, I think. And for architects who, by and large, have, I think a lot of architects are fairly introverted, just because of the work we do in some ways, and the people that are drawn to that. So I think it takes a little extra effort to get out and meet people face to face and talk about yourself and talk about your work.
You mentioned that some projects you have had to go after them aggressively. What does that look like when you're going after a project aggressively? What are you actually doing?
Oh gosh, that's hard for me because I'm not the most aggressive person in the world. But it entails a lot of phone calls and a lot of keeping up on what might be going on. I think to keep good track of, like, politically, it's kind of interesting what is going on in, say, a municipality, and to make contact so that you know ahead of time what kind of project is going to be coming down the line, and keeping pretty aggressively keeping up on those trends and figuring out what sort of the next big thing is going to be and what the priorities of developers are going to be, what where they seem to be going. And so it's keeping up on the economy, keeping up on, like, the political winds, which way they're blowing in the case of public work, where funding might be coming from, say on a state level. So being aggressive about paying attention to what the state legislature is doing and what they're doing with their budgets, and trying to keep contact with, like, your local representatives, be it city council or state representatives. So all of that. And at the same time, hopefully you're doing a little advocacy work for your profession as well, and showing the people in charge of a state budget that architects matter and that we care about the work and we need to be paid properly and all of that stuff. So I think there's a lot of sort of just legwork that has to be done especially when you're going after public work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, as you're going for these projects, and particularly with the managing the firm on the year to year, what's your financial kind of processes that you use? Do you set a yearly budget? Do you shoot for a certain target percentage in terms of profit? Are you that scientific about it? Or is it more like, hey, we're just going to kind of keep our thumb on it and it's worked out in the past? Where are you kind of at with that?
That's very interesting. You should ask that question because we're just kind of going through that right now. I think we do it periodically.
Okay.
Like, where are we? How are we doing? What's going to happen? I think a lot of architects right now are thinking, is there going to be a recession? Is there not going to be a recession? How should we prepare? What have we been doing right? What do we need to improve? I think for us, it's mostly been the latter of just, well, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and hope for the best as far as profit goes. But I think it's you realize, it's really good to have goals, and you have to start looking at what the goal is going to be. How profitable are we going to be, and what's a magic number for us, so that everybody's happy, not just partners, but your employees as well. To emphasize the people that work with you. Well, the more profitable we are, the more you will benefit from bonuses and, any profit sharing that comes along and things like that. So it's not just, we want you to work harder. It's more like we all are in this together, and we want to become, we want to be happy with the work we're doing, but we also want to be really efficient, because the more efficient we are, and the more people feel like they're satisfied because they're really getting something done, in a timely fashion, and the clients are happy and we're making a profit. I think that's just good for everyone. But it's a balancing act sometimes, because you look at, you kind of look at the rates of the whole office and you say, well, we'd love everyone to be 80% efficient, except for the people who are doing the marketing and stuff like that. But we have to understand that we're also asking them to come to a couple office meetings a week, or head a certain committee, and internal committee in the office that helps us educate ourselves. Maybe you have a skill or a piece of knowledge that needs to be transferred to the rest of the office. So we have a time set aside every week for that, which is really cool. We call it Tuesday University. But the more things you pile on there, the more it's like, oh, we're only like 60% efficient. So, It is truly a balancing act. And as the years have gone on, we have tried to be a little more strategic about that, and pay a little more attention to the numbers, the metrics of all that. But, as you know, architects are not trained to initially to think that way. So that's why things like your podcast are so valuable to us. I was just looking at your whole list of podcasts and thinking, I got to go back and listen to every single one of those.
Yeah,
if it's not too late for me.
It's never too late.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope not.
Now, Mary, you mentioned, we've talked about recessions a couple of times. I'd love to know, what are some of that, you've been through a number of them, what are some of the top lessons that you've learned going through recessions?
Don't panic.
Don't panic. Don't panic. Tell me about that. Don't panic.
Yeah, don't panic. Well, I think it's very it's scary, when all of a sudden it's like, oh, these people stopped this job, this job fell through. Oh, we're not being paid, by these people, this developer, maybe because the project is stopped in its tracks. I think you go through enough recessions and you realize, okay, there's going to be a bottoming out, and then we're going to get out of it. It's not going to last forever. Projects will start up again. They'll have to start up again because people need things built. So what have we got that's going to keep us sustained? Who can best execute those types of projects? it's always a painful lesson to learn that you will have some layoffs that you have to face in your office, even people that you really treasure sometimes. But if the thing that they really want to do and can do well is a multifamily development project, and all of those projects are gone, it's just, impossible. And so you try to, sometimes though, in the past, in the big recession, we loaned people out to other firms who maybe were doing better because they were larger and they had a lot of different jobs in different sectors. And so that's one of the strategies I think that worked well for us, because it kind of fostered goodwill among not only our employees, our former employees, but our colleagues as well. Because if we have something you can use, that's great. And then maybe at some other time we can reciprocate. So instead of thinking in sort of a cutthroat, competitive way, which is also very tempting in a recession, to say, I've got to beat out everybody else. I'm going to, lower my fees so that I'll get this job and not that other person. Instead of thinking that way, but thinking in more of a cooperative way and a collective way, I think we all get through a recession a little better, a little more intact, at least from a sort of psychological way, and also maybe from a financial way as well. If we could cooperate a little more than compete.
Yeah, you mentioned don't panic, and I love that, this idea of not panicking in case of recessions upon us. What are some of the So there's the internal compass of just being freaked out in our head, stressed out, and letting that emotionally affect us and impact us. And then there's the decisions we make when we panic. What kind of decisions do you see that maybe you've made in the past or other firms make that you think, oh, that's not the thing to do when you're heading into recession? Like with the wisdom I have now, we just buckle our seatbelts a little more and hold in, or is it just on the psychological side? What would you say? What does it look like when someone really goes into panic, and how they can actually harm themselves?
Gosh, interesting question. Since we have pretty much survived the recessions, and not completely imploded, although one thing like I was talking earlier about how we did loan out some of our employees. You kind of trade employees with another firm. If they need someone, you can say, you don't lay someone off. You say, here, go work with these people for a while. We did some of that. But I think we probably didn't do enough of that in at least the giant big recession. We tried to keep too many people on for too long, and that wasn't good for anyone, because then they couldn't go off and find a position that was a little more sustainable for them through a recession. So that was sort of a mistake of not panicking, but not really being as realistic as you need to be. I think that sort of realism is what you have to have. You can't, I think panicking would be trying to get jobs at any cost. Say like, no, we'll do this job for almost free. I don't think that's a very good idea. I think architects have tended to kind of undercut their value for a long time. And that's always a mistake, I think, because then a client would get used to that and say, well, you did it for X last time. Why are you raising your fees now? I'm going to go someplace else. And you say, but that was different. This is what we're doing now. But that's very hard, to go back. So I would say that's one of the kind of panic devices you probably shouldn't do.
Good. Any other top lessons as you look at the recessions you've been through that come to mind?
Pardon me, what was the question again?
And yeah, any other top lessons that come through to you as you think about those past recessions?
Oh, well, I think on the flip side of hanging on to people too long is you want to really nurture and cherish the employees that fit well in your office. I think so many people who decide to be architects and come out of school, everyone has a particular skill set, and a particular desire and why they wanted to be architects. So I don't think there are, bad employees and good employees. I mean, from maybe a little bit, but not really. And I think it's just a matter of fit, and it's giving people the opportunity to do the work that they are really good at doing, or that they think they could be doing. So you nurture that particular skill set, and to realize that those employees who are really embracing that idea and really working at the top of their ability and what they want to be doing, and recognizing that and rewarding it is really, really an important lesson, because that's what you are. You're a firm made up of people. You can't just do it on your own. And when you are nurturing those people, you're teaching them about, not only architecture, but also this kind of interpersonal skills that are needed to make the process successful, to make the job successful, to make the client happy, make the regulatory agencies you have to work with happy as they can be, and to be doing fulfilling work. So that's like the big number one lesson, I think.
Wonderful. Mary, what advice would you give to practice owners who are looking to get a higher caliber of work? What advice would you give to them based on your experience?
Wow. I think you have to, wow, it's so tempting. Here's another like a recession lesson, I guess. It's so tempting to just take any work that you can possibly find, whether it's like a, doghouse remodel. I mean, I don't know. And think, architects are so optimistic. You always think, I can do a really good job on this. I can make this really cool, even though I have zero budget and the client is not very inspiring or inspired. And, I know I can make something good out of it. And I think that that's a great attitude up to a point. But I mean, I think there are times when you just have to say, you know what? No, this is not going to be a process or a product that I'm going to be proud of. And that's it. That's that really is the bottom line. There are some and I'm not saying that small budget projects can't be wonderful and fulfilling and very high caliber, because they can. But with those especially, you have to be particularly strategic, thinking that there is something about this that is going to lead to a larger or more important or more a higher quality sort of project. And you have to say, well, maybe I'll lose money on this, but I really know that this is leading where I want to go. So that's good as long as you know that. But sort of resigning yourself to be a little bit pickier, and to actually be able to say no to a project, and then work a little harder to pursue the client that you want, or the project that you see out there that you really want to compete for. Another great strategy for firms starting out, throughout a lifespan of a firm, is to partner with other firms who you admire and whose work you admire. I'm a big believer in collaboration among architects, and some of the best work we have done, we have partnered with other firms, sometimes, mostly because they perhaps have an expertise in an area that we don't, and vice versa. So, for instance, if it's a combination community center library, we bring the library expertise and they bring the community center expertise. And then we both have an excellent project for our portfolios. And that is a great way to sort of build a quality portfolio, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Last question for you today is there any question that you feel like I haven't asked, maybe something that would be valuable to share that I haven't touched on? So what would be the question that I haven't asked that you would that you would have hoped that I would have?
Just quickly, I was going to say that after a career in architecture, a long career, building a firm, being so immersed in it, it's your life, figuring out how to sort of gracefully back away from it while supporting the people that you work with, and also supporting your own mental health about stepping away from something that has been your life. And I think there's it happens all the time. There are generations of architects who step away from the business, and everybody that I talk to, at least, hates to use the word retire. They say things like, well, I'll always be an architect. And yeah, I think that to some extent, at least that's how I feel. And I'll probably keep my license for a long time and always think of myself. That's my identity. And how to there's some, nuts and bolts about succession in a firm, but then there's also a lot of kind of therapy, I think, for lack of a better word, that needs to be done on that front. So I guess that I'm just kind of talking to myself about it, and thinking, how am I negotiating that? How's that going to work? And how's it serving the firm, serving our other partners, and serving myself as I take at least one little step back from my career? That would be a topic for another podcast.
Indeed, I can imagine with so much of life spent doing anything. There's always these stages when we are moving on to something different. And while it's exciting, there's also a bit of wanting to hold on to the familiar and what we've done in the past.
Absolutely.
Mary Johnston, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom. Appreciated having you on the show.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And that's a wrap. This episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, the world's leading step-by-step business training program that's helped more than 103 architecture firm owners structure their existing practice so the complexity of business doesn't get in the way of their architecture. Because you see, it's not your architecture or design skills that's holding you back. It's the complexity of running a business, managing projects and people, dealing with clients, contractors, and money. So if you're ready to simplify the running of your practice, go to businessofarchitecture.com/smart to discover the proven, simple, and easy to implement Smart Practice method for running a practice that doesn't get in the way of doing exceptional architecture. The views expressed on the show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you conquer the world. Carpe diem.